So the song is called Summertime, and it was kind of intended to be on Pony, but it didn't really find its place onto it. So I'm really happy we get to put it out now when we've re-recorded it, and it's a lot, kind of more in keeping with what I envisioned for it. And it's basically a song about missing somebody, even though they're like right there with you. I've spent a fair good amount of time in Nashville. I've played here a bunch of times with over the years, and I've been spending more and more time here recently. I really love it, and I work with a lot of people here, and obviously being a big fan of country music, it's a nice place to hang out. My first love for music, I guess I grew up in a household that was really the emphasis was like very much on kind of different kinds of music and art, and I think I had a very kind of diverse upbringing with regards to kind of art in general. I mean, when I was really little, I fell in love with Dolly Parton, but I didn't really know that she was like a real person. When I was a kid, I thought she was like Pee Wee Herman or something. I thought she was like a character because she was so like, like larger than life. I think I fell in love with the kind of performance of country music first when I was really little, like the storytelling of it, and then I fell in love with the actual music as I kind of grew up. But I fell in love with punk when I was a teenager. But I grew up listening to all kinds of music. I'm a big fan of soul music and gospel and classic rock and psych, and pretty much anything. The kind of difference of how I wrote songs before when I was younger, and I predominantly kind of wrote like harsh kind of heavy music and punk music, and I think it's harder, essentially is what I'm saying. I think it's harder to write pop structured music or kind of storytelling country music. I think for me, sincerity was very difficult for me to put into my music for many years, and I think over the past maybe like 5 years, my only agenda with songwriting has now just become to like force myself to put as much sincerity and emotion and truth into what I write and what I do. And for many years as a songwriter, I think I really struggled with that. As an artist in general, I think I really struggled with that. I've always been a performer my whole life, and I've performed on huge stages as an actor, and I was a dancer for a long time, and all kinds of things. And I think, but now what I do is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done, because I think I find it hard to be kind of exposed and sincere and raw as a person. I'm kind of closed. I used to find it easy to write from a place of kind of like aesthetic, but now I find it hard to write the music I write now, but I think it's more rewarding the way that I write now. That's not a persona for me. I am Orville Peck. I think a misconception about me is that because I have an aesthetic or whatever people want to call it, that somehow what I do is something cultivated or something kind of it's like there's something kind of synthetic about it or whatever. But to me, I grew up, especially the country musicians that I grew up loving, they all had very heavy aesthetic attached to them, and I kind of think that my definition of kind of classic country music is like the crossroads between sincerity and like drama or performance or boldness or camp or whatever you want to call it. If you look at someone like Porter Wagoner or even Johnny Cash or of course Dolly Parton or those people were like larger than life personalities, and some of them wore essentially what are costumes or kind of performance pieces, but the music they wrote had like a lot of sincerity behind it, and a lot of the themes of common in country, heartbreak and loss and whatever, but they're done through what I guess people could maybe interpret as a gimmick, but I think that is a long lineage of country. And so for me, what I do is I write really sincere songs about my personal experiences and where I've lived and where I've traveled and people I've met, and I do it with some flair and artistry attached to it because I'm a country western musician, and that's just how I want to do it. So for me, I think it's misinterpreted sometimes that what I do is kind of insincere or maybe just like a character or a shtick or whatever, but I don't see it like that at all. I just am Orville Peck, and these are my stories. Dolly is a great example. How she wears like crazy wigs and outfits, or even through the 80s when everyone was kind of like resurging, like the rodeo wear and the kind of nudie suits, and I mean, to me, that's like such a huge part of country music, or at least the kind of country music that I love and grew up on. You know, like even Johnny Cash, who seemingly was a very kind of low key person, maybe visually, but you know, he built a whole career on being the man in black who, you know, was like spoke for the convicts and all that. And I mean, I just think that that's part of country music for me. Is, you know, part of the country music is storytelling, and I think adding elements of performance and adding, you know, a little sparkle here and there, or like adding maybe a little bit of embellishment on the story or whatever. I think that is just how you tell a good story, you know, and I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tell my stories, but I'm trying to tell them well. I mean, it's funny because like some people's perception of Americana is this kind of like 4th of July type situation, and you know, like all this kind of like apple pie, picket fence kind of like, but I mean, that's not really been the reality for a long time. You know, that's almost like a really dated perception of America. And it's funny because that, even the kind of people still writing that perception of it has almost become this warped new version of Americana, where it's like people obsessing over that, but it's kind of a darkness to that even, you know. I mean, I've lived all over this country. I'm not from North America in general originally. I'm not even, you know, from the Northern Hemisphere originally, but I lived all over North America for many, many years in lots of different cities. And the things that always fascinated me were maybe parts of American culture that kind of get overlooked as American culture. I mean, motels, for instance, I think are really fascinating. Motels don't really exist anywhere else in the world except for, you know, Canada and the US, really, in the same way that we know them. And I think there's something really cool about the people that end up in them and how they're run, and, you know, the kind of crazy shit that goes down in them sometimes. And I think funny things like that's way more American to me than, like, you know, someone standing on their lawn saluting the flag or whatever. I think that there's really fascinating, colorful and weird and vibrant parts of this country that we all recognize and know, but that to me is way more, you know, Americana than, you know, kind of like swinging on the porch or whatever. Do I think that, you know, if I hear that song completely out of context, whatever, does it sound like country to me? Not really. I mean, you know, like not to my ears, because I grew up on very kind of classic country, but I mean, I can't honestly say it's very different from a lot of the music that's played on country radio now anyway, which I also don't think sounds very country, to be honest. So, but if we're calling that country, then, you know, we got to call that country too. I really like the song. You know, I think it's cool. I think it's amazing that, like, a gay black kid who basically built their career from being a Reddit troll and like a barb and, like, you know, just like trolling Reddit and Twitter. And then now he beat incredible world records. And I mean, I think that's cool. Like, listen, I come from a subversive place, and I come from like a punk background and I mean, I think that is admirable to me. You know, I think it's cool, and I think the fact that it's shaken up what is country, the time-old question, you know, and it's funny to me because I think that question happens in every generation, you know, like when Waylon and Chris Christopherson and Willie Nelson, when they all, you know, did the outlaw movement right here in Nashville, that was a big, you know, a big question. Oh, but, you know, is this really country? Or like, I mean, it's happened a million times. You know, every generation, it's like a new crop of sounds come into country music, and everyone's suddenly like, oh, this isn't country, whatever. But then 10 years later, everyone's like, oh, that's in the canon. You know, like no one's questioning whether, like, you know, Willie Nelson is country music, obviously, you know. And I think, I don't know, I think it's just, country goes through these like growing pains every once in a while, and I think it's cool. I think it's fun to be a part of that. I think why not? You know, I think I don't know. I think because a lot of questions come up about, you know, is what I do country, and I'm always in the same conversation, it seems, as like Little Nas X and even Casey Musgraves at times, and it's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm in pretty good company if that's what people are concerned about.